Hey everyone, welcome back to K-Korner, the channel where we dive into the wild world of entitled people and their unbelievable stories. Hope you enjoy it. And without further ado, let's go. I was walking down Castro Street in San Francisco with my buddy when we saw this amazing Ferrari parked across the street. It had this incredible silver glitter paint job that caught the sunlight just right. We couldn't help but stop to admire it. As we were checking out the car, 3 girls walked up to it. They looked like they were in their early 20s, dressed up for a night out. One of them, who I'll call Karen because that's exactly who she turned out to be, stepped up onto the trunk of the Ferrari. Me. Hey, what are you doing, Karen? Relax, it's just for some pictures. She completely ignored me and walked up the roof of the car, then laid down on her stomach. Her friends started taking pictures, giggling and encouraging her. Friend 1, that's it, Karen, work it. Friend 2, this is going to look so good on Instagram. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This was someone's expensive car, and they were treating it like a prop for their social media posts. Just as I was about to say something else, a guy came running out of a nearby shop yelling at the top of his lungs. Owner, what the hell do you think you're doing? Get off my car right now. Karen, chill out, we're almost done. Just one more pose. The owner's face turned red with anger. Karen, still on the roof of the car, posed with one arm in the air and one leg up, like she was some kind of model on a photo shoot. Owner, I said get off my car, now. Karen, God, you're so uptight. Fine, I'm getting down. The owner started charging towards the car, clearly furious. Karen finally seemed to realize she might be in trouble and rolled off the roof. Her friends stopped taking pictures and looked nervous. Karen, you need to chill out, man. It's just a car. Owner, just a car. Do you have any idea how much this costs? Karen, whatever. It's not like I heard it or anything. The girls started walking away towards a nearby restaurant. The owner was standing there, inspecting his car for any damage. He looked devastated. I felt bad for the guy, so I walked over to him. Me, hey man, I'm sorry that happened. Those girls were way out of line. Owner, thanks, I can't believe people sometimes. This car is my pride and joy. He went back into his shop, still shaking his head in disbelief. I thought that was the end of it, but boy was I wrong. As soon as the owner disappeared into his shop, Karen and her friends came rushing back to the car. Karen, quick, let's get a few more shots before he comes back. Friend 1, I don't know, Karen. Maybe we should just leave it alone. Karen, don't be such a buzzkill. This is going to look amazing on my profile. Before anyone could stop her, Karen hopped up on the hood of the Ferrari and sat there posing for more pictures. Her friends, despite their initial hesitation, started snapping away with their phones. Me, are you kidding me? Didn't you learn your lesson the first time? Karen, mind your own business, loser. No one asked for your opinion. Just then, the owner came back out of his shop. When he saw Karen on his car again, he looked like he was about to explode. Owner, I told you to stay off my car. Get down right now. Karen, oh, calm down. I'm just sitting here. It's not a big deal. Owner, not a big deal. Get off my car this instant. Instead of listening, Karen did something that made my jaw drop. She started jumping up and down on the hood of the Ferrari. Karen, see, your precious car can handle it. Stop being such a baby. The sound of her shoes hitting the hood made me wince. I could see scratches forming on the once pristine paint job. Owner, stop, you're damaging my car. Karen, oops, looks like your fancy paint isn't so tough after all. She finally jumped off the car, but the damage was done. There were visible scratches all over the hood where she had been jumping. Owner, do you have any idea what you've done? This is going to cost thousands to fix. Karen, not my problem. Maybe you shouldn't park such an expensive car on the street if you can't handle people admiring it. Friend 2, come on, Karen. Let's just go. The girls started to walk away, laughing like it was all some big joke. The owner looked like he was on the verge of tears, running his hand over the scratches on his car. I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. Me, hey, you can't just walk away from this. You damaged his property, Karen. And what are you going to do about it, huh? I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. Me, I recorded the whole thing, from you jumping on the hood to scratching the car. If you don't make this right, I'm sure the police would be very interested in seeing this video. Karen's face went pale. Her friends stopped laughing and started looking worried. Friend 1, Karen, maybe we should just pay for the damages. Karen, are you crazy? Do you know how much that would cost? Owner, less than what it'll cost you if this goes to court. I'll press charges for vandalism if I have to. Karen, you wouldn't dare. Me. Want to bet? I've got all the evidence right here. Karen looked from me to the owner, to her friends, then back to me. I could see the wheels turning in her head as she realized she was cornered. Karen, fine, I'll pay for the damages. But this is ridiculous. It's just a car. Owner, it's not just a car to me. It's something I worked hard for, something I take pride in. And you treated it like your personal playground. Karen rolled her eyes but pulled out her phone. Karen, whatever. How much is it going to cost? Owner, I'll need to get it properly assessed, but for now, let's say $5,000 as a down payment. I'll contact you for the rest once I get an estimate from a professional. Karen, $5,000? Are you insane? Me. Would you prefer to explain this to a judge? Grumbling, Karen opened her banking app and made the transfer. The owner verified the payment on his phone. Owner, I've got your contact information now. Don't even think about blocking me or I'll go straight to the police. Karen, this is highway robbery. Me. No, this is consequences for your actions. With one last glare at all of us, Karen stomped off, her friends trailing behind her looking embarrassed. The owner turned to me, relief evident on his face. Owner, thank you. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't recorded that. Me. No problem. I couldn't stand by and watch someone get away with that kind of behavior. Owner, I appreciate it. Not many people would have gotten involved. Mobile phones became common in my country around 2004, just as I finished high school. My parents bought me my first phone, a second-hand Nokia. It was bulky and basic, but I promised myself that someday I'd buy a new phone with my own money. When college started, I had a 2-hour daily commute. In high school, I had excelled academically and won several district-level awards. These awards were being distributed during my first year of college. One nationalized bank award finally gave me enough money for a new phone. I bought a Sony Ericsson K300i and a premium SIM card, not realizing it had been abandoned by its previous owner. By the third day, I started receiving calls for a guy named Bitsa from various financial institutions. It turned out the number previously belonged to him. And for 20 years, I've been getting these calls. Determined to keep my premium number, I began a routine of blocking wrong numbers. Back then, blocking was device-specific, so each time I got a new phone, I had to start over, keeping a list of numbers to block. I got my first job after graduating in 2009. Around 2010, I was assigned to a new project with a notorious reputation for burning people out due to a nefarious project manager named Bits. I didn't know his full name for quite a while. He took pride in making our lives a living hell. Bits ruled with an iron fist. From the moment his team stepped into the office, they were met with a barrage of emails and messages, each more urgent than the last. Bits thrived on creating chaos, often changing project deadlines on a whim, demanding his team work late into the night and through weekends. Bits' presence loomed over every task. He insisted on micromanaging every detail, yet was quick to take credit for any successes, no matter how small. Failures, however, were met with his notorious tirades, publicly berating his team and assigning blame without hesitation. His unpredictable temper kept everyone on edge, afraid to make the slightest mistake. Meetings were another tool in his arsenal of torment. He scheduled them during lunch breaks and after hours, ensuring no one could escape his grasp. These meetings were often pointless, serving only to reinforce his dominance and disrupt any semblance of work-life balance his team might have had. His relentless stream of emails continued around the clock, each carrying a thinly veiled threat. Perfection or dismissal. Under his reign, morale plummeted and burnout soared, yet Bits remained oblivious, satisfied only by his complete and total control. I was quite ashamed when I learned that he was from the same area as I was, and had gone to the same school, though years before me. In 2012, our company merged with a parent company. Almost nothing changed personnel-wise, but infrastructure-wise. We got MS Outlook and an organization view. That was when I first learned about bits from an organizational hierarchy perspective. His full name was an eye-opener. It was Bitsa. Now the name was common enough, but at the time, mobile numbers had an area-specific pattern. So I already knew that the previous owner of my number was from the same area as me. Still, it could be someone else. I wanted to dig deeper. I talked with an old mentor who lived in the same area and had coached several high school students for the last 2 decades. He confirmed my suspicions. I won't go into the details, but it was evident that Bitsa and Bits were the same person. I had been quite pissed with this unknown person named Bitsa for almost a decade by then, and Bits had been the bane of my and several others' existence for quite some time. This is where the revenge lies. First, I unblocked all the numbers in my phone. I was getting 5 to 6 calls daily on average, but after unblocking about 150 numbers, it increased to 15 to 18. My answering strategy changed drastically. Instead of saying "wrong number," I politely explained that the owner had changed his number and provided his current number to update their database. This is where I could be the I also volunteered his manager's number, in case he tries something else. The fallout was epic. These people had been trying to find him for almost a decade. Banks had sold his debts to companies that harass people for a living to get their money back. It turned out he had been taking loans in everyone's names. His wife, parents, uncles, aunts, and giving everyone that same number. He was evading credit card debt and loans of upwards of $200,000. Equivalent in USD, but it's a shitload of money where we are from. Apparently he had almost 20 cases filed against him, but no one could find him. Probably why he thought he could walk on water. There are multiple versions of what happened at the office when his manager started to get calls about him. He was let go about 2 months later, haven't heard from him since. For some backstory, I worked as a valet in a small coastal city in college, and the restaurants I worked for were very popular for both locals and tourists. We'd generally be busy year-round, but as the restaurants are both waterfront, spring, summer, early fall are our peak seasons per se. The downside to these restaurants is that parking can be a huge pain. Combined, the restaurants can seat around 400 people at any given time and can usually turn over about 2,500 seats on a busy weekend, but the parking lot can only hold about 60 to 70 cars at a time, which isn't much at all. That's why I, the valet, am there. We have about 25 to 30 designated valet spots, used to have double that amount, but I digress, and are really good about utilizing all of them efficiently, so we can park as many cars as possible, thus getting as many tips as possible. Being that the valet spots are kind of in a weird spot, but really close to the restaurants and our stand, and there aren't any signs that say valet only, we usually show up a bit early and cone the spots off so people know they aren't for self-parking. Now, most people see the cones and recognize those spots are pretty clearly not available, but some people are so dumb or jerks that they will move the cones and park in our spots anyways. Disclaimer: there is a parking garage for overflow parking, but people don't particularly like using it. People do this pretty regularly, and we're usually pretty cool about it. One of the valets will normally just walk up to them as they are parking and tell them that the spot is reserved for valet, and they'll usually comply. Obviously, this was not the case yesterday, or I wouldn't be writing this right now. While we were in full swing last night, some douchebag is not 100 feet from me moving a cone so he can try to sneakily take one of our spots. I was talking to a customer, so I wasn't able to immediately go tell him to not park there. After finishing up talking, I walked over to Douche as he was getting out of his car, and immediately knew I had encountered this exact guy trying to do this nonsense before. After this encounter, I knew revenge was going to be necessary. Our conversation went as follows. I told him, "Hey man, I'm sorry, but these spots are for valet only. That's why we have the cones set up. If you'd like to self-park, you can park in this main lot," pointing to the full lot, "or in the parking garage. But there's nowhere to park in that lot, and I don't want to park in the parking garage. You guys always do this to me." So if I valet it, I could just park here? That's nonsense, bro. I'm parking here whether you like it or not. I was pretty taken aback and basically just walked away, not wanting to get into a fight over a parking spot. I knew it was time this guy learned his lesson. Now, I don't have the authority to tow his car or give him a boot, and I wouldn't anyways because I'm not a jerk, but my power is in the pure number of cars I have access to. Luckily he did this at about 8 p.m. I contractually only have to be there until 10 p.m., at which time I can park the remaining cars in certain places, and then leave the keys with the bartenders inside. Most nights I would stay to get the tips, but tonight I was dropping keys. Conveniently, Douche had parked in the area where we moved cars to before we dropped the keys. My plan: use the valeted cars to block Douche in and then leave, with him having no way of leaving until the cars around him left. There was one car that would be particularly important, the one directly in front of him. I had a special car for that spot. It was owned by a restaurant employee that I knew wouldn't be off until 2 a.m. perfect. I maneuvered all the cars around him in a way that didn't make me look like I was intentionally blocking him, but in a way that made it look like I had no other choice. Everything fell into place perfectly, and I could already feel a justice chub starting to form. I went inside to drop the keys and explain to the restaurant manager what happened and my revenge. She loves us, and said she'd 100% have our backs, which I figured she would. I told her to text me and tell me how everything played out. This is the text I received last night at around 11 p.m. The guy just came up to me mad. He said there was a car blocking him from leaving and that it needed to be moved immediately so he could leave. I tried to explain that you guys have to put cars there before you leave, and that you even told him to not park there. I guess that made him mad, so he started raising his voice at me. Bar manager saw and told me that he had been drinking for a while, which I assumed from the beginning. I told him that I couldn't, for liability reasons, allow him to drive home since he had been drinking. He got really mad because he lives 40 minutes drive away, but ended up taking an expensive Uber home. She told me she slipped in the argument that he was going to get another ride, whether he liked it or not. Edit. Just a couple things to add to clarify some things. This is a privately owned parking lot, as most parking lots are. The restaurants who owned it gave us permission to use this lot, and told us where they wanted our spots to be. Just because something is open to the public doesn't mean it's not privately owned. These restaurants also did not want us towing booting cars. 99% of the time, us going up and telling people they couldn't park there was sufficient, and they would move or give us their keys and we could move their car if needed. If not, we'd whine to them but ultimately couldn't do much. This happened several years ago. I no longer live in this town nor valet. There were some signs that said valet parking only, just not enough in my opinion. Like 2 signs for 20 to 25 spots. Enjoying the stories yet? If you do, please subscribe, like, and comment. Yesterday, my family and I went out for a nice dinner and a trip to the movies. This is something we rarely do since we live moderately far apart and all have our own jobs. Our party included my dad, my mom, my sister, and me. Everything was pretty relaxed and we were enjoying ourselves. The food was nice and the movie was kind of funny. Nobody was expecting what awaited us just moments later. When the movie ended, we started walking out of our row towards the exit. This cinema is rather small, so there was only one door. When I looked back to see where the rest of my family was, I saw that my mother was arguing with a couple. The man was a balding middle-aged snob with thick glasses and an oily face. The woman was dressed in a black dress with a golden necklace, and had a fake blonde haircut reminiscent of a Karen. Both had this unbearable upper-class, I'm better than you attitude oozing out of them. It was pretty clear that they didn't want to get up to let my mother pass through. Now, you see, my mother has a medical problem with her knee. She wanted to pass the row in this specific direction so that she wouldn't have to huddle through the whole length of the row to get out. She tried to explain this to the woman, but the woman just made fun of her, taunting her with, "Oh, just climb over me then," and "No, I can't let you pass, I want to see the credits," after a while of arguing. The woman put her feet demonstratively on top of the seat in front of her to block my mother's way. My mom, all worked up and crying, passed me by the exit, taking the long way. I don't take disrespect lightly, and I knew that if I didn't act, this scene would follow me for some weeks. I remembered that I had my water bottle with me, filled to the brim. So I took it out, walked back to where the couple was still sitting, and gave the woman and her boyfriend a refreshing shower directly onto their bellies and laps. They saw me coming and looked at me all smug and victorious, until the water hit them. The woman and her boyfriend looked shocked, and had a "how could you" expression. Her boyfriend, who had also yelled at my mom previously, confronted me with a quiet and shaky, "Why would you do that? You can't do that," because apparently the woman and her boyfriend never learned that their actions have consequences. As I turned to leave, I saw the woman going into full rage mode. She was climbing over her boyfriend and the seats to get to me. Her partner yelled something like, "Karen, please leave it as it is, don't do it." Just as I went through the exit, I realized she had made her way right behind me. I turned, and she was standing there with raised fists like 2 steps apart from me. I looked at her and asked, "Oh, so you want to fight?" She glared at me with the rage of 1,000 frustrated middle-aged women and sputtered, "Yeah, let's fight. I am a 23-year-old guy, fairly muscular, and big into fighting sports. I've been training in both Wing Chun and Muay Thai for quite a while now, since it's fun, and adds to my overall fitness. Don't worry, I didn't obliterate the woman. I also didn't really attack her. I just assumed my fighting stance, took a step forward, and asked her again if she really wanted to fight. The woman was still there, in all her freshly soaked glory, seething with rage. At this point, I kind of wished she would try to hit me so I could bring her down in an elegant, self-defense kind of way. But she just stared at me, so I threw a half-hearted warning shot with a center kick in her direction, not hitting her, but to establish distance. Next thing I knew, the woman ran back into the cinema, and my sister and my mother were getting in my way to end the situation. The woman was hiding behind some people in the cinema. I shouted something like, "Where are you going, Karen? I thought you wanted to fight." Her balding, middle-aged boyfriend walked to the exit, saw me, and went wide-eyed again, completely overwhelmed by the situation. We then turned and left. A very kind woman reassured us that the woman had acted weird and uncontrolled. She speculated that the woman was on some substance. Well, after all, we got a good story out of our family night, and all the woman and her seemingly subservient boyfriend got were wet clothes and dirty looks. There I was, standing in line at the Seattle airport with my family, waiting to get our boarding passes scanned. It was just another day of travel, or so I thought. We'd been in line for what felt like forever, shuffling forward inch by inch. My kids were getting restless, and I was starting to feel a headache coming on. But we were almost there, just a few more people ahead of us before we could get our passes scanned and be on our way. That's when I noticed her. A young woman, probably in her mid-20s, with perfectly styled hair and designer luggage. She was weaving through the ropes, bypassing the entire line. At first, I thought maybe she was an employee or had some special pass. But then I saw the look on the face of the Transportation Security Administration agent at the checkpoint. TSA agent. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stop right there." The woman turned, her eyes wide with an expression of confusion that seemed just a little too exaggerated to be genuine. "Young woman, oh, is something wrong?" TSA agent. "Yes, ma'am. You need to have your boarding pass scanned before proceeding." "Young woman, but I already did that. The gentleman over there scanned it for me." She waved vaguely towards the other end of the security checkpoint where another TSA agent was working. I couldn't help but roll my eyes. Did she really think that would work? TSA agent. "I'm sorry, but that's not possible. All boarding passes are scanned right here." The young woman's face scrunched up in what I can only describe as fake bewilderment. "Young woman, no, I'm sure he scanned it. He was very nice about it. Maybe you should check with him." I watched as the TSA agent sighed, clearly used to dealing with difficult passengers but not enjoying it one bit. She called over to her colleague. TSA agent. "Hey John, did you scan this lady's boarding pass?" John, the other TSA agent, looked up from his station, confusion evident on his face. John, no, I didn't scan anyone's pass over here. All scans happen at your station. The young woman's act started to falter. I could see a flicker of annoyance cross her face before she quickly composed herself. Young woman, well, someone must have scanned it. I wouldn't just walk through without having it scanned. TSA agent. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to return to the back of the line and wait your turn like everyone else. That's when the woman's true colors came out. Her face turned red, and her voice rose to a screech that made my kids cover their ears. Young woman, this is ridiculous. Do you know who I am? I have a very important meeting to get to, and I can't be late because of your incompetence. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Did she really think she was more important than everyone else waiting patiently in line? TSA agent. I'm sorry, but the rules apply to everyone. You'll need to go to the back of the line. Young woman, I demand to speak to your supervisor. This is unacceptable treatment. By this point, everyone in line was watching the spectacle. Some people were muttering under their breath, while others were openly glaring at the entitled woman. I felt a mix of second-hand embarrassment and irritation. A supervisor appeared, looking stern and professional. Supervisor, what seems to be the problem here? Young woman, finally, someone with authority. Your employee here is refusing to let me through even though I've already had my boarding pass scanned. The supervisor listened patiently as the woman repeated her story, embellishing it with claims of discrimination and threats to sue the airport. I had to admire the supervisor's composure as she dealt with this human tornado. Supervisor, ma'am, I understand you're upset, but our security procedures are clear. All passengers must have their boarding passes scanned at this checkpoint. There are no exceptions. Young woman, but I'm going to be late. Can't you just let me through this once? Supervisor, I'm afraid not. Security is our top priority, and we can't compromise on that. You'll need to join the line like everyone else. The woman's face contorted in rage. She stamped her foot like a toddler throwing a tantrum. Young woman, this is outrageous. I'll have all of your jobs for this. My father is a very important lawyer, and when he hears about this... Supervisor, ma'am, if you continue to be disruptive, we'll have no choice but to call airport security. Now please, return to the end of the line or leave the airport. For a moment I thought the woman might actually explode. But then, as if realizing she'd lost this battle, she deflated. With a final glare at the TSA agents, she turned on her heel and stomped to the back of the line, muttering under her breath the whole way. As she passed by us, I could hear her complaining to no one in particular. Young woman, can you believe this? It's like they think they're so important with their little badges. Don't they know who I am? I exchanged glances with my wife, both of us trying not to laugh. Our kids, however, had no such restraint. My daughter, Mommy, why is that lady so angry? Me. Well, sweetie, sometimes people think the rules don't apply to them. My son, but that's not fair. Me. You're right, it's not fair. That's why it's important to always follow the rules and treat others with respect. As we finally reached the front of the line and had our own boarding passes scanned, I couldn't help but feel a little sorry for the TSA agents. Dealing with entitled people like that woman must be exhausting. This incident blew up in March 2021 in the middle of lockdowns and stuff. It's a story about someone whose ambition was bigger than their ethics and the law, and it comes back to bite them. At the time, I was working as a manager in a mid-sized business. While I was there, I was assigned a new member to my team. I'll call her Evil. Evil was in her mid-20s and was pretty fresh out of college. She was the kind of person who could talk your ear off about all of her ideas and plans and what she was working on, but never really seemed to have anything to show for it. When I talked to her about clients complaining that she wasn't getting back to them, she would always have an excuse about how difficult they were, how snowed under she was, and how she had written an email, but it must have gotten lost in spam, so on and so forth. Basically never her fault. It got to the point where after one of our monthly meetings I called her in and explained that if she couldn't get her tasks done, she needed to let us know so we could help delegate resources to make sure things weren't slipping through the cracks. I'll admit I was pretty direct. Her performance was impacting the whole team, and my job was literally to keep the team on track. I get that people can be under pressure, that there can be stuff going on at home which impacts work, and that sometimes people need a bit of help. But if every time I ask about a project you say, yep, everything's good, I've got it under control, and then it all falls apart, and your only response is to blame the client, then we have a problem. I explained that I wasn't going to start formal performance management or anything like that, but from now on I'd like her to check in with me on Monday mornings for 10 minutes to go over objectives for the week, and to check if she needed support with any of her clients. I know it isn't fun to be micromanaged, so I tried to keep these check-ins short and mostly just offer assistance on stuff. She clearly hated my guts though, and apparently was hatching her own revenge. Now part of my role included use of a purchasing card, which wasn't in my name but I had access to. I was given the card to basically make small purchases for the office or spend up to $500 on clients. The card was kept in an office I shared with another team manager where we both could access it when we needed it. One day I get a call from accounts asking about a few abnormal purchases on the card. A Photoshop subscription, a couple of Uber Eats orders, an HBO subscription, etc. I say I don't know anything about them, and they should check with the other team manager. Apparently the other team manager didn't know anything about them either, because after the weekend I got called into the big boss's office. After my colleague and I had denied involvement, accounts had started calling Adobe and Uber and stuff to find out where the transactions were coming from. They said that not only were the accounts in my name, they were registered to an email address with my name in it too. I can't describe what it felt like to be in that meeting. I felt physically sick. I couldn't work out what was happening. I was so shocked, I didn't know what to say. I felt like I was about to get fired, and I couldn't understand how that was even possible. The director was going on about how access to the card was a privilege, and that I had signed an agreement about appropriate use and so on and so forth. I denied that I had been using it inappropriately, and the boss listened, but I could tell he wasn't that convinced. To be honest, in my head I was gaslighting myself and worrying that I had somehow saved the card in Google, and maybe my wife had been accidentally using it or something. It was terrible, and I found myself apologizing and saying, I don't know how this happened. I assure you that I know that none of those expenses are appropriate uses of company funds. There must have been some kind of mistake. Can I please have the details and look into it, etc., etc. When I finally got out of that office, job still intact, well, barely, Evil was waiting for me at my office door. She was grinning from ear to ear and sweetly explained she had been waiting for our morning meeting. I told her something had come up and we'd do the meeting tomorrow. And she said, "Oh, will you be in tomorrow?" Confused, since I didn't know I was in a revenge thread at the time, I just replied, "Yes, why would I not be in tomorrow?" And she just sipped her tea and said, "Oh, no reason," turned around and went back to her desk. Something felt off, but I was still worrying about what had happened with the boss, so I spent the next couple of hours calling my wife, calling Adobe, and doing the same legwork that accounts had done. It became very obvious that someone had been using my name and the company card to spend a bunch of money online. Had I been hacked or something? Personal info on the dark web, and these hackers just really wanted Photoshop and Wendy's delivered? It was the Uber Eats that was her undoing. After getting on the phone and talking through what had gone on, and obviously giving my name for the account and everything, the fellow on the phone told me where the food had been delivered. It was in our city, which made me rule out straight away any notion of my data being sold online or something. Now I was suspicious and pissed. I don't like to think the worst of people, but now I was. Listening to my gut, I pulled up Evil's employee information and checked her address. I pulled it up on Google Maps, dropped a pin on her place, and then looked for the address Uber Eats had given me. It was the corner of her effing block. I was furious. When she left work for the day, I got IT to give me access to her laptop. There were some things she had been smart about. The IP address she had been using was the office, which would have tied back to me. She had even had the food delivered to a different address. She had even made a fake email address. But saving her passwords on a work computer was a mistake. I called the boss that night and explained what I had found, and kept the IT guy with me to support the fact that I hadn't just logged into her computer and made it all up. The next day, the boss called her into the office and fired her so bad there were red trucks lining up outside the building. When she teary-eyed left his office, I made sure I was standing in the hall sipping a cup of tea. It had gotten cold while I waited for her, but still tasted sweet. I hope she went home that night, because if she did, she would have received some nice goodbye Wendy's delivered by Uber Eats, paid for on my personal card, of course. Revenge and justice can be the same thing, right? In the end, she was fired. The boss apologized, and we were on good terms when I left in October for a new gig. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more captivating stories. Share your own experiences and opinions in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay tuned for more epic tales.